thinking about new techniques in investigation is critical to having somebody to rely on so that any prosecutor who wants to do these cases has somebody to call to say, I need help in figuring out how to do it. We also have in our office a cybercrime lab, which is a state-of-the-art facility and has a director and 4 specialists that, part of their job is to, do research and understand the ways in which a lot of these crimes are being committed, to understand how to address it, how to do effective forensic analysis, how to understand how to investigate these cases. And then we train the prosecutors, and we provide that training overseas as well. We also have a network of prosecutors in the field called Computer Hacking and Intellectual Property Prosecutors, or CHIPS is what we call them. And it's a network of over 240 prosecutors nationwide. And they're very experienced in prosecuting IP crimes and computer crime cases. And they act as sort of a local counsel in their field. We work very closely with them. We have a listserv, so when somebody is working on a case and they don't quite know what the law is or if there's some new advancement, they'll send an email out. And so you have a network of, including our office, 300 people thinking about the issue that you're working on. It's a very effective way to maximize the resources that you have. And I said, it's important to target or be strategic about who you target, but that doesn't mean every, other kinds of crimes that aren't as large scale or aren't involving health and safety or organized crime don't get addressed. We have stepped up our efforts to work with state and local enforcement as well, who handle cases that are more local in nature and are not as big and aren't prosecuted on the federal level. We also work very closely with our investigative partners. The FBI, which is a part of the Justice Department, just devoted 51 agents solely to investigating IP crimes. We also work very closely with the IPR Center, which you've heard the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Director, John Morton, yesterday talk about. It's a very effective center that co-locates partners in 15 different investigative and regulatory agencies. Again, it's about being together to be able to communicate about the trends that you're seeing or to deconflict cases so that you're not expending multiple resources to address a single crime without knowing or being able to work together on it. We also have on a national level from the administration in the Justice Department, we created a year ago a new IP task force, which brings a high-level attention to the issue and a coordinated approach across all components of the Justice Department to address IP crimes and think about it strategically. Through the IP task force, we've increased our public awareness campaigns and working with industry. And you also heard about yesterday the newly created office in the White House called the Office of the Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator. And her job is to coordinate IP enforcement across all of government, including trade policy, thinking about issues involving commerce and patent and trademark issues, and thinking about working with the Justice Department as we develop our strategy on IP enforcement issues. And it brings a lot of attention to the issues. And with attention comes public awareness, and with public awareness, hopefully, comes reduced consumers who want to engage, a number of consumers who want to participate in this crime, who understand what the risks are, and all of us in this room understand what those risks are. But we're still, of course, educating the public on what that means. And if you're lucky and times permit, that kind of attention might also provide additional resources that you can use. On the international side, we have placed IP law enforcement coordinators overseas, both one in Asia and one in Eastern Europe in Sofia, Bulgaria. And I believe, I don't know, he might be sleeping in this morning, I don't know, but if not, he could be here today. His name's Matt Lamberti. He's been very effective in developing relationships in this region and developing that trust and assisting in capacity building. We also participate and have led what's called the IP Criminal Enforcement Network, in which about 15 or 13 Asian communities participate, and we get together to talk about ideas and cross-border issues. And we provide targeted training, such as programs where you train trainers that go back to their countries or their districts to then train people there, so that there's a whole cadre of people that are able to engage in these efforts. And of course, working very closely with industry and taking advantage of industry's voluntary efforts, such as the Coalition for Safety in Internet Pharmacies that was mentioned yesterday, in which ISPs and payment processors and industry groups got together to form a voluntary cooperation to combat illegal online pharmacies. Although I will object, my office is called the Computer Crime and Intellectual Property Section, also known as CCIPS, and this group is called CCIP. So I'm thinking there might be a trademark issue in there somewhere that I'm going to have to pursue, but that'll be for another day. So those are some of the strategies that we're employing in the U.S., and maybe we could talk about later. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It's my turn to speak to you from the Interpol perspective. And I want to turn this question slightly on its head a little bit, because we believe, certainly within the IPR program, that despite the economic climate, it is possible to focus scarce collective resources on achieving collective goals. And I think that's the issue, collective goals. So what I want to propose today is that, yes, of course, we need to look for new options, but new options are quite hard to find. So what I'm going to suggest is that we need to consolidate what we already do well and actually get better at doing it. And the way I'm going to do that, if I can, is to try and give a very short case study in the time available to me to talk to you about how we, within the IPR program, try to maximize resources and so that we can, by working with our other partners, be more effective. And I'm going to entitle this little part, The Golden Rules of Partnership Policing. But this doesn't just apply to Interpol, which, as you know, is a police organization. It actually applies to all policing activity, where if you're trying to generate not only public sector funds, but also private sector funds. And the most difficult thing for us within not only police, but within the law enforcement community, is identifying and illustrating the cost benefits of partnership policing. Because we're very good in the policing world at arresting people, saying we've arrested this many people, we've made these many seizures. But it's actually quite difficult for us to show how effective we are. So from an Interpol perspective, it's very important for us to show the people that we work with, not only in the public sector, but also the private sector, that there is a direct benefit from working with Interpol. And we've gone from a situation where in the early days, I used to have the private sector coming to me and saying, John, we'd like to work with Interpol, well, what can you do for us? And the situation has changed quite dramatically now, in the sense that when people come to me, either from the private or the public sector, and they want to work with us, they don't ask me, John, what's in it for us, because they already know. And I think that's a very important factor in all this. So dealing with the policing side of it, and how we're going to make best use of our resources, and actually try to access not only direct funding, but also other types of benefit which don't necessarily come in the form of funding. And I think the most important thing as a program is that you need to have a clear idea of where you're going. You need to have a long-term strategy. In the IPR program, we have a rolling 3-year strategy. Despite everything else that changes around in the organization, we as a program know where we're going. And what we want to do is we want to raise awareness among national policymakers, primarily in the police, but also in government, about the links between IP crime and transnational organised criminals. We want to facilitate and coordinate international interventions, and we want to train all IP crime investigators. We want to make sure that the people we work with are able to know what they're doing, know what we're trying to achieve collectively, and are able to do that. Because we, Interpol, have no power to make anything happen. Everything we do is through the power of persuasion. And also, of course, we've got the Interpol brand, which is quite strong, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So quite clear, you need to know where you're going as a program, and and the reason why you need to do that is that I, in fact, get people coming to me to offer me assistance, which would actually take me off at a tangent, which doesn't complement what I'm trying to do. So I avoid that situation. So it's very important for me as a program manager to look for a win-win situation. You know, what's in it for me, what's in it for either the government or the industry sector that we're going to work with. Interestingly, within Interpol, 90% of our funding comes from the public sector. 10%, an absolute maximum of 10% comes from the private sector. But within the IPR program, it varies from year to year, but the direct or indirect benefit we get is roughly about 50-50 between the public and the private sector, which I think gives you an indication of how we work and how we manage to work with the different sectors. So, as I said, we need to identify this win-win situation. We need to identify the intervention point. What can we, Interpol, working with our partners in the private sector and the public sector, where can we intervene that makes the most difference? How can we do that? So that's very important for us. And linked to that is we have to have achievable success. There's no point in us agreeing to do something if we're going to fail. So that doesn't mean that we're not ambitious, which we are, but we make sure that we know we can attain collective success and shared success, and that's most important. For example, when we put out a press release, we don't talk about how good Interpol is. We try and emphasize the good work done by our partners, in particular frontline police and customs officers, and you'll see that theme throughout all Interpol IPR program press releases. Collective success. The other important thing is, obviously, the money is, and the work we're doing has got to be appropriate. And a very important fundamental part of that is the ability of both partners to say no. So I try and be as transparent, that's the current buzzword, isn't it, with my people we work with. And if we can't do it, I say no. If they ask me to do something that's inappropriate or we can't do it, I say no. And that's a two-way street. And we've got very good partners who recognize that. So the other thing is that quite clearly we need to understand how we can make best use of the Interpol brand and also not let the brand be abused by our partners. So I've said that the work's actually done by our member countries, the people in the police and customs. But nevertheless, by us focusing on an issue and raising awareness, that in itself brings a bit of pressure, and we are able to be a catalyst for action, and that's what we do. That's fundamentally the most important thing for us. So what are we uniquely able to do? I've said that we need to be able to show the cost benefit. Well, we're uniquely able to bridge the gap between the public and the private sector. We're able to, dealing with the public sector and working with national authorities, we're able to open doors for them and give them a much wider market and outreach. Working with the private sector, we are able to bring the public and the private together, make introductions, make things happen, get good, strong alliances. The other thing we have to do is to do what we say and be reliable. And I think that one of the keys to our success over the last 5 years is that the people we work with know that if we say we're going to do something, we do it and we're reliable. And the other part of that is choosing the right partner. In the early days of our program, we were very inclusive. We wanted to encompass all the different elements. And that's a very admirable quality, and certainly in this forum we should be talking about partnership and involving everybody. But from my perspective, it's very important not to have passengers. We can't afford to carry passengers. We can't afford to waste resources. We need to make sure that people we work with are equally committed to the cause, as are all the organizations represented on the Global Congress Steering Committee and others. So, in summary, from my perspective, the problem is not actually raising external funding or obtaining direct and indirect benefit to support the program and to support collective efforts. My biggest problem, if I'm frank, is I'm in competition with other teams within Interpol, getting sufficient core budget funding to enable me to act as that catalyst for action, so I can reach out and get the additional resources and to work with others to achieve collective success. But the thing that I find most difficult to get is actually police officers with a skill set that we need, which is that ability to work with the private sector, the ability to manage international operations, the ability to persuade. And that's the most difficult resource for me to get. But I'd suggest to you that if you know what you want and you've got a good program and you focus on partnership, there is money there and there are lots of direct and indirect benefits we can get from working together. Thank you.